I've conducted over 500 funerals in my 41 years of ministry. So much grief. I've watched families bury children. I've watched spouses weep over departed mates. And I've watched lifelong friends say goodbye. It is always heartbreaking. One thing that those funerals have all had in common, no matter who the person was or how that person lived, someone always says they are in a much better place. Now, when I know that person was a Christian, I agree. But there have been times I've had to bite my lip and not respond to that statement. One funeral I conducted was for a man I led to Christ many years ago, but soon after his conversion, he turned away from God and left the church. He couldn't pay the cost of discipleship, so he gave up on the Christian faith. However, we remained friends over the years, and when the time approached that it was apparent he was dying, he asked me to officiate his funeral. His family chose two songs that they wanted to conclude the funeral service with. One was My Way, the Frank Sinatra song. You're familiar. The repeating phrase is, I did it my way. And they chose that song because that's how the deceased man had lived his life. He had always done it his way, according to his values and his beliefs, and he was very proud of that. And then immediately following that song, they wanted Amazing Grace played. They could not see the incongruity of playing those songs one right after the other. For grace means salvation is God's gift to us. We cannot earn it on our own. We cannot obtain it our way. I couldn't assure them he was in a better place. Another funeral I conducted was for a gay lady. She never claimed faith. She never worshiped in a church. Her nephew gave a eulogy of her during the service. He described how when he turned 18, she took him to a gay bar for his birthday celebration, and they watched a drag queen show together. He said he never laughed so much in all of his life. And as he was telling the story, he had all the audience laughing along with him hilariously in the funeral home. About 25% of them were her gay friends. When he concluded, I stepped up to the podium, and someone from the audience said out loud, "That's a tough act to follow." It wasn't. I referred to Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verses 2 and 3, which tells us it's better to go to a funeral than to a party, and that sorrow is better than laughter. And then it tells us why. Because death is the destiny of us all, and we need to take that truth to heart. I said it's good to laugh about past enjoyments, but we need to think soberly about future realities. You could have heard a pin drop. I was kind to the lady in her eulogy, listing all her admirable qualities and her accomplishments, but I couldn't say she was in a better place. I encouraged the audience to consider their relationship with God in preparation for their demise. I know it comforts us to believe our loved ones are in a better place when they leave this world. Death is painful. The separation hurts. But I can't preach anyone into heaven at their funeral service. We choose our destination by the road we decide to travel through life. Jesus said something very powerful about that in Matthew 7, verses 13 and 14, when he said, "Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it, but small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it." Jesus identified two roads that are ours to choose from. One of those two will be the road that we travel on. The first he called the narrow way, and he said few find it. Many people dislike the concept of narrowness. In our contemporary culture, it's an uncomplimentary term. It's used to describe someone who is intolerant, prejudiced, exclusive. Sometimes that word is used of criticism of Christians, saying that we are bigoted and judgmental and we are unenlightened. But did you know that Jesus was the first one who used that term about Christianity? He described the Christian life as the narrow way, meaning that boundaries and parameters are set for that way. Those boundaries and parameters have been determined by God according to His truth. And then Jesus said the narrow way leads to the narrow gate, or in some translations, small gate, but it's the same word. It's narrow, it's small because it's limited in its access. That access into that place is also determined by God, as it should be, for God alone determines right and true and good. But some dislike any religion that restricts and confines. And so they redefine faith to make it more comfortable, to make it easier. This teaching that Jesus gave was an answer to a question that someone in the crowd threw out to him. We don't read that in Matthew's account, but we do in Luke's account. In Luke 13:23, we read, someone asked him, "Lord, are only a few people going to be saved?" Wow, that'd be a tough question to answer. But Jesus answered it. In verses 24 through 27, he said, "Make every effort to enter through the narrow door, because many, I tell you, will try to enter and will not be able to. Once the owner of the house gets up and closes the door, you will stand outside knocking and pleading, 'Sir, open the door for us.' But he will answer, 'I don't know you or where you come from.' Then you will say, 'We ate and drank with you, and you taught in our streets.' But he will reply, 'I don't know you or where you come from. Away from me, you evildoers.'" Jesus portrayed heaven as a place of limited access. He put himself in the place of the doorkeeper. He put his audience in the place of those seeking entrance into heaven. They expected to be admitted and were shocked when they were not able to gain entrance. And so they claimed some connection with Jesus. They had hung out with him. They had been in the streets when he taught in their town. They had watched him perform his miracles. They had been a part of the welcoming crowd. But Jesus indicated that they had had no relationship with him. People do the same thing today. They think that because they believe in Jesus or believe in God, they'll go to heaven. They might go to church occasionally. They might even do some volunteer work. They watched The Passion of the Christ after all. They read some of the Left Behind novels. They tuned into Joel Osteen on some Sundays. They're in with Jesus. But the problem is, they don't follow Jesus. He is not their Lord. You see, a relationship with Jesus is built on more than just belief. It's also built on obedience to him. And without obedience, belief is never saving faith. That teaching that Jesus gave was not popular then to the crowds he talked to, and it's not popular now when people hear it. The common delusion in our society is it doesn't matter what you believe, for all roads lead to heaven. Jesus called that the broad way. It's broad enough to include everybody, no matter their lifestyle, no matter their belief. That's a very popular theology today, but it is not biblical theology. That philosophy was stated by Barack Obama some years ago when he quoted Muhammad Ali. I believe the year was 2009. He said, I love this quote. This is part of why he's the greatest. He said, rivers, ponds, lakes, and streams, they all have different names, but they all contain water, just as all religions contain truth. Obama restated the philosophy that it doesn't matter what religion you follow, it doesn't matter what you believe, it doesn't matter how you live. And that philosophy works well for us in a society in which we try to live in peace with fellow citizens, but it is not true of citizenship in God's kingdom. Proverbs 14:12 says, there is a pathway that seems right to a man, but in the end, it's a road to death. There is only one road to being in God's favor. That road is narrow. It's the only way. In John 14:6, Jesus taught that He is that road and that no one will enter God's kingdom apart from Him. He taught something similar in John chapter 10, verse 9, when He said, I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. We live in a world that hates that kind of narrow focus of saying there's only one God and only one way. 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 4 tells us Satan has blinded the minds of unbelievers. He blinds people to their spiritual state. He blinds people so they think they are in right relationship with God when they are not. He blinds people so they think they are on the right road when they are on the wrong road. There is only one way to heaven, and only a few will find it. The other way that Jesus described, He called the broad way, and He said most will end up choosing it. The broad way is the all-inclusive way. Jesus used two Greek words when He taught this truth to describe the way and the gate. They're very similar in definition. Wide gate, broad way mean about the same thing. The word for wide means across the horizon of the countryside. And the word broad is the word platus, from which we get our English word plateau, meaning a wide-topped mountain. When those two words are used together, it conveys the idea of a great expanse without visible boundaries. That's what the majority prefer. An all-inclusive way without boundaries, a way which will incorporate all people indiscriminately. And that sounds right politically. And it sounds right in a humanitarian way, but it is spiritually inaccurate. God has set boundaries of morality and faith. And so His way is not all-inclusive. But the broad road is, it's the sinful way. Some prefer sin. In Matthew 24, verses 12 and 13, Jesus said, because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. Jesus taught that wickedness is increasing in the world and has made its way into many hearts, and we've seen that, haven't we? That's why so many are so accepting of sin. Ours was once a Christian nation, founded on Christian principles and morals and values. But sin has increased in our society, and the love of the moral and the love of the right has grown cold in our hearts. And we have drifted from those Christian principles and values and morals. And many can no longer distinguish the right road. There is no room for the sinful in heaven. Many verses of Scripture teach us that. But I'd like for us to look at the one in Revelation chapter 21, verses 7 and 8. It says, "Those who win the victory will receive reward. I will be their God, and they will be my children. But cowards, and those who refuse to believe, and those who do evil things, who kill, who sin sexually, who do evil magic, who worship idols, who tell lies, all these will have a place in the lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death." We have a choice of roads before us. Terry Laughlin said it this way: God has set before you two gates, one wide and one narrow. He has set before you two roads, one broad and one narrow. He has set before you two destinations, one of eternal blessing and one of eternal damnation. Your greatest problem is the signs pointing down both roads are marked "the way to live." Both gates read, "Enter here." And both destinations are labeled heaven. He's right. Many choose the wide gate and the broad way because the road looks smooth and traveling looks easy and more comfortable. And on that road, you can take all your stuff, the baggage of sin that is comfortable to you. No one on that road will be critical of another person's baggage, for all are tolerant of sin and open-minded to it. They won't criticize you for the baggage you carry, for after all, they are carrying the baggage of sin too. The narrow road looks difficult. The narrow gate has only room for you without your baggage. You have to unload all of your burdens and sin and leave them behind you as you travel that way. The road begins at the foot of the cross, where piles of baggage are left. On the broad way, I am my own boss. I go where I want and when I want and do what I want. I care about me first and make all life choices accordingly. But the narrow way demands my commitment to a Savior. I lose my life in Him in order to find life. I die to myself and live in Him, meaning I follow in His steps. Let's compare the broad road to traveling to Las Vegas. That city represents the immorality of the world. After all, no other place has been called Sin City. The street into that city is wide to accommodate all the people who flock there. It is one of the most popular tourist destinations of the world. Large crowds of diverse people travel there. It promises them guilty pleasures and secret indulgences and abundant happiness, with the thrill of hitting the big jackpot, or enjoying all the food and alcohol you can consume, or legalized prostitution and sexually explicit entertainment. Many take the road there, seeking fulfillment of those promises. But there is a lie to those promises. The city and its attractions cannot provide the happiness advertised. Did you know that Las Vegas is the suicide capital of the United States? And did you know that Nevada leads the nation in personal bankruptcies? And it also has the highest divorce rate in the U.S., as well as the highest rate of drug-related deaths in our country. That city is a place of destruction. Marriages are ruined there. Financial security is ruined there. Lives are ruined there. And so that city stands as the personification of the broad road that Jesus described. Now let's take a look at the narrow road. You'll notice there is a cross in front of it. That's where people place the baggage of their sin before they journey. The road goes beyond the cross toward the gate to heaven. That road is not always an easy one to travel. It sometimes goes up difficult hills. It sometimes traverses over rough terrain. The road and the gate, they are narrow. There is no room for sin there, only room for you. It is in fact the road of salvation, saving people from the destructive power of sin in their lives, saving people from the great destruction that lies at the end of the broad road. The narrow road is the right road. It leads to life. We read in Luke 13:25, once the owner of the house gets up and closes the door, you will stand outside knocking and pleading, "Sir, open the door for us." But he will answer, "I don't know you or where you come from." That door is still open, but it will one day close, maybe soon. Too soon for some to finally decide to enter. They will be left outside pleading in vain. Don't you wait. Don't risk entering destruction. Choose the narrow road, the road to life. God's greatest blessing of all awaits you there. May you find it soon.